Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. And today we're going to continue with our migration snapshot series looking at Austria. And we're going to do this using the European Commission's Knowledge Center on Migration and Demography's Atlas of Migration. And I'll make sure to link that down in the description below. If you're interested in the atlas more generally, I'll also link that down in the description below, and I have a video on it that you can see right here also. So what we're going to do today, looking at Austria, is we will first look at the population of immigrants and immigrants. We'll look at residence permits and visas issued. We'll look at asylum applications. We'll look at one possible measure of irregular migrants in a country, as well as citizenship and naturalization. We'll also look at some indicators of social inclusion, and we'll look at education and employment. Now, let's jump right in and get started. So first, if we look at the population in the country, so in Austria today, or at least in 2020, the population was close to 9 million people. And of those 9 million people, close to 17% of them were not Austrian citizens. So we have around 8.5% of the population was migrants from within the EU, and around 8% were migrants from outside of the EU, or people that do not hold citizenship. So here we're talking about non-citizens either from outside of the EU or within the EU. So again, about 16 to 17% of the Austrian population were non-citizens in 2020. Now, that's the stock of immigrants in the country, but we can also look at flows. And if you're interested in the difference between migrant stocks and migrant flows, you can check out my video on that here, and I'll also be sure to link it in the description below. Now, let's look at annual flows in 2018. So that's talking about how many people actually came into the country or how many people left the country in 2018. So in 2018, 106,000 people entered the country and 67,000 people left the country. Now, of those who were coming into the country, around 71% were from within the EU and 29% from outside of the EU. Now, with regard to emigration, or people leaving Austria, it was split 50-50. Well, 49% were going within the EU and 51% were moving outside of the EU. Now we can continue looking at residence permits issued during a specific year. And now when we're talking about residence permits, this is mainly then for people who are not EU citizens, because EU citizens don't need residence permits in Austria in general. So what you can see here is between 2016 and 2019, a minority of the residence permits that were issued were explicitly for work. And the majority were really for family reasons or other reasons. And other reasons could also be things like admitting refugees or asylum seekers. We also see that a small proportion were admitted for educational purposes. And in 2019, with regard to all the valid residence permits at the end of the year, we can see that the majority of the valid residence permits at the end of the year in 2019 were for other reasons than education, family, or work. Now let's talk a little bit more about asylum applications. So here you can see between 2017 and 2020, first-time asylum applications. And you can see that in 2017, there were a higher number of asylum applications put in than in 2020, for example. So we went from a bit more than 22,000 to a bit more than 13,000 applications in 2020. What you can also see is that the majority of applicants are male as opposed to female. Now, if we look at the decisions on those applications that have been put in, you can see the first instance decisions here also between 2017 and 2020. And what you can see is that there is a proportion of the asylum applications that have been put in that are accepted on the grounds of the Geneva Convention. So that's the International Refugee Convention. And there is another part that in some cases that is accepted based on subsidiary protection or another humanitarian visa. But there's also a substantial number, which is the purple here that you can see, that are rejected in the first instance also. And in some cases, this is around 50% of the applications. Now we can also have a look at one possible measure of irregular migration. And so to do this, what we can do is look at the number of people who were ordered to leave Austria in a given year because they no longer had the right to stay in the country, and the number of people that actually left. So the difference between these numbers we can assume would be irregular migration, so the people that don't have the right to stay but also haven't left the country. So here you can see that between basically 50 and 65% of the people who were ordered to leave Austria have actually left the country in that year. So the difference then again would be more irregular migration. Now let's turn to citizenship and naturalization. So what we can see here first is foreign citizens who have acquired citizenship during the year. So this is obviously between 2016 and 2019. And what we can see, which is very similar to other countries in the EU, is that the majority of people who are acquiring citizenship in Austria are non-EU citizens. And that is, of course, because there's less of a benefit to European citizens to receive the citizenship compared to non-European citizens, since European citizens are supposed to, for all practical measures, be treated like Austrian citizens. That is under EU law. So we see that the share of foreign citizens who have acquired citizenship also in general, we see a higher rate amongst foreign or third country nationals. But actually in both cases, we don't see very high shares of citizenship acquisition. So here we see around 1% of foreign citizens from non-EU countries and much less than 1% of European citizens. Now we can move on to another indicator of social inclusion, or a few indicators of social inclusion. So the first that we're going to look at here is the median income of people in the country. And what you can see also very clearly is that nationals have the highest income, whereas immigrants coming from outside of the EU have the lowest income. If we also look at overcrowding in households, so this has to do with how many people are living in a given space, you can also see that the lowest overcrowding rates are among nationals and the highest amongst non-EU immigrants. Again, if we also look at the risks of poverty or social exclusion for adults, but also for children, we see that immigrants in general have a higher risk of poverty or social exclusion compared to nationals. Now, across all of these different dimensions and indicators, you can see that immigrants from within the EU seem to fare a bit better than immigrants outside of the EU. Now, if we turn to education, what we can see here is that EU nationals and nationals of Austria look quite similar with regard to their education levels. I would say EU nationals just have slightly higher education in the very high end of the education spectrum, but they don't look so different. What we do see is a bit of a difference between migrants from outside of the EU and European nationals and Austrian nationals. And here you see, while there's still plenty of people that have medium and high levels of education, there is a larger group that has low levels of education here. So almost 40% of the non-EU immigrants have low levels of education. Now, if we look at employment and unemployment rates, what we can see here is that there are not big differences in many regards between European nationals and Austrian citizens. We do see that non-European immigrants seem to fare a bit worse with regard to employment rates. So for instance, in the major age category between 25 and 49, so that's our big, working age population, what you can see is that non-EU immigrants have around a 74% employment rate, whereas nationals have an 89% employment rate, and EU nationals have an 85% employment rate, and this is at least amongst the men. which is a little bit closer. Amongst women, we see a slightly different picture. So the employment rates of Austrian women are much higher than that of third country nationals, but also higher than that amongst European immigrants also. And then you can see also the unemployment rates have look very similar. So they basically mirror the employment rates, with, in general, third country nationals having the highest rates of unemployment. Or when I say third country nationals, I mean immigrants coming from outside of the EU have the highest rates of unemployment in Austria. However, if you break this down now by education level, looking at low, medium, and high education, you also see actually a quite similar story, particularly if we're looking at medium and high levels of education. So again, Austrian nationals and EU nationals look quite similar, but third country nationals have a bit worse employment rates, even by their educational attainment. Now, I hope that just gave you a really quick idea and snapshot of what's going on in Austria today with regard to migration. Again, if you're interested in snapshots from other countries, you can check those out here. I'll link them here and in the description below. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos that I upload every week on different migration issues. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.